This is Judy Copeland, pastor of the Hancock Congregational Church in Hancock, New Hampshire, coming to you once again from my home during this season of coronavirus. Just a quick note on the hymn you heard in the intro, Now Thank We All Our God. This is a hymn that dates from the 1600s. It's one we typically sing in our meeting house on Thanksgiving Sunday, on the day of our annual meeting, on the Sunday of Old Home Days, all those big anniversary historical type occasions. But again, it's probably good to note that this is another of the plague and pestilence hymns in our hymnal, written in a different season of pandemic. Martin Rinkart was a pastor in Saxony, Germany at the time of the 30 Years' War. And in 1637, some 8,000 people in his community died of famine and disease, including Rinkart's wife and most of the members of the town council. The hymn has many, as Rinkart wrote it, has many, many verses, but the one that perhaps speaks to us right now goes like this. Keep us all in grace and guide us when perplexed, and free us from all harm in this world and the next. We can let that be our prayer for this morning, that God would guide us when we are perplexed and free us from all harm. Our subject this morning is gardening. Two reasons for that. One is that it's been my observation, and this is, by the way, completely anecdotal, that some of the people who are doing okay with social distancing, and by okay, perhaps what that just means a little bit better than average, are people who are thinking about and starting to work in their gardens. And the second reason for choosing this as a topic for today is that this is the season of Eastertide, and it's the time when we take up the stories of Jesus' resurrection appearances, his reveal to his followers. And one of those stories, one of my personal favorites, is the one told in the Gospel of John, when Jesus appears to Mary just after she has discovered that the tomb is empty. Jesus asks her why she is weeping, whom she is looking for. And in chapter 20, verse 15 of John's Gospel, it says this, supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him. Supposing him to be the gardener. That's the operative phrase, the one that I keep coming back to. What does it mean that the risen Christ seemed to Mary to be a gardener? What is the spiritual truth we find in that image of Jesus as a gardener? What does it have to teach us? What's the connection between what we do in our gardens and what we are meant to do in our spiritual lives? And those are sort of some of the questions that are rumbling around for us this morning. A dozen or so years ago, I worked for a stint between pastorates at the Quilt Museum down in Lowell, Massachusetts. And there, sort of in the back office, we had one of those inspirational posters kicking around, and it was titled, Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned from Quilting. Similarly, I think I gave my daughter a plaque one time that was titled, Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned from My Dog. I'm sure there are other such lists. I guess it's sort of a genre of its own. And so just for fun this morning, I thought I would put together my own sort of list or little inspirational moment or poster. And I've titled it, Everything I Need to Know About the Spiritual Life I Learned from a Gardener. And of course, you know which gardener I mean. So number one, you're going to need a shovel. It's pretty hard to garden without a shovel. Gardeners need that tool for moving away debris, for opening up the ground, for planting the things you hope to grow. And in our spiritual lives, we need tools for moving away the debris of fear and for opening up the ground for our hopes to grow. And for us, the tool, the shovel, is prayer. Now, I know right now our experiences of prayer are probably pretty much focused on begging sessions of us pleading with God for the outcomes that we so desperately want in this season of COVID-19. But prayer is also a way for us to go a little deeper into our own lives. It's a way of taking some of that free-floating anxiety that sort of just rides over the top of things and digging into it. And sometimes that going deeper, that conversation with God, brings our anxieties into focus, and that can be a very beneficial thing. Just as we use a shovel to move compost and topsoil and other good things around our gardens, we can use prayer to redistribute our anxieties and to uncover our hopes. And so that's number one. You're going to need a shovel. You're going to need prayer to do some of the heavy lifting right now. Number two, don't be afraid to get dirty. The best gardeners I know come in from the garden covered in mud, happily covered in mud. They have dedicated gardening clothes that they don't care about messing up, and they aren't afraid to get right into the soil. In our spiritual lives and in our communal life, we also have to be willing to get dirty. And by this, I mean we have to be willing to dig into the stuff that we ourselves are dealing with and also that others are dealing with right now. Some of you are probably experiencing some feelings of malaise. We're starting to hear more and more, get more reports about that. And we hear about all of those ambitious things that others are doing with their time at home. And, it makes us feel pretty lazy or pretty unproductive by comparison. So you are not repainting your kitchen or teaching yourself how to play the piano or reading the classics or even getting it together to make decent, healthy meals. Please don't be hard on yourself. You do not have to accomplish a blessed thing during this time other than to wear your mask and wash your hands and maintain social distancing for the sake of the most vulnerable members of our community. If keeping busy is one of your ways of being in the world, and if it is something that's helping you through this time, then that's great. But it's okay for even usually productive people to do nothing and to just take it as enough that you've made it through another day. Be gentle with yourself right now. Some of the dirt right now, the messy stuff that almost everyone is dealing with at one level or another, are feelings of loneliness. When I say don't be afraid to get dirty, it can mean not being afraid to go there in your conversations with others. Right now, the very best thing we can do is to listen to others and to listen deeply, to allow people to speak their truth even on their bad days. Let's not move too quickly to pep talks or attempts to cheer others up, what Barbara Ehrenreich calls bright-siding things. Everything feels harder right now. Your dog gets sick, or you break a light bulb, or your basement gets a little bit of water in it, or the internet goes down for a few hours, and it just feels so much harder, so much more overwhelming than it normally would. Even usually manageable temporary problems can feel huge. The gift we can give one another right now is the gift of sympathetic listening. The gift of being willing to get down in the dirt and messiness and loneliness of life right now, in our conversations and in our emails and texts with the people we love and the people we're in communication with. Point number 3, Sometimes you just have to wait. Plants grow according to their own germination schedules, and while you can coax them along with lights and heating pads, fancy grow boxes, or the homemade version cobbled together with a string of Christmas tree lights and an old Amazon box, ultimately, you can't push the schedule by all that much. Sometimes we just have to wait. And this is a period of very deep waiting right now. Point number 4, this is the last one. Take a moment's rest and enjoy the view. There is nothing quite like sitting down, drinking some cool water, and taking in the sounds and smells and visuals your garden offers, even in this very early part of the season. And if your garden is no more than a plant on your windowsill, that's fine too. When we step back from the hard work, gardening, it offers us sort of a mini Sabbath, I think, or the fruits of our garden, the results of our garden. They give us this opportunity just to take a minute to step back and to rest. I think there's a reason why the Bible has human life beginning in a garden in the book of Genesis, and why even at the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, heaven is given a garden setting as well. There it is said that the throne of God faces out over a tree, a magnificent tree, a tree of life bearing 12 crops of fruit with a fresh crop each month, its leaves to be used as medicine for the healing of the nations. In her book, A Blessing of Toads, the nature writer Sharon Lovejoy reminds us that a garden gives many harvests, but perhaps the most important is the one that awakens our spirits every single day. The one that awakens our spirits every single day. So that's my list. Number 1, get out the shovel of prayer. Number 2, don't be afraid to dive into the dirt and listen to those who are lonely. Number 3, accept the fact that sometimes we just have to wait for a new life to take off. And number 4, take the time to rest and enjoy what your garden has to offer. Everything I need to know about the spiritual life, I learned from a gardener. Amen. As we finish up this morning, we have that often requested hymn, In the Garden. Sometimes it's called, I Come to the Garden Alone, and I don't know if I've ever paid attention to that word alone in the title before, but very apropos. It was written by C. Austin Miles, a New Jersey native who was born just after the Civil War. He trained and worked for a time as a pharmacist, but he also had this talent for writing gospel hymns. And when gospel music enjoyed a tremendous surge of popularity in the 1890s, Miles, at the age of 30, left the pharmacy business and went to work for a music publisher, writing, editing, and promoting gospel hymns such as this one from 1912, I Come to the Garden Alone.